Hello lovely fairy tale friends and welcome to my new video. Today I am going to read for you Little Red Riding Hood. I hope you enjoy it and subscribe my channel. It was washing day at the farmhouse. A warm breeze was blowing, and a red hood and cloak fluttered on the line. A little girl skipped out of the house to bring in the washing. First, she unpacked the red hood. She pulled it over her dark curls and tied it under her chin. Then she took down a matching red cape and put that on too. The little girl loved her red hood and cape so much that she wore them all the time, except when her mother insisted that they absolutely had to be washed. And so everyone always called her Little Red Riding Hood. The girl took down the rest of the washing and went back inside. The kitchen was filled with a warm smell of baking. Little Red Riding Hood's mother was at the table packing a basket with food. She put in a freshly baked cake, some fruit, some soft, creamy cheese, and a jar of honey. "Who's that for, Mother?" asked Little Red Riding Hood cheerfully. "It's for your grandmother," her mother replied. "She isn't feeling very well, so this food will do her good." "Shall I take it to her?" Little Red Riding Hood suggested. "I can keep her company for a while to cheer her up." "That's a lovely idea," agreed her mother. "What a thoughtful girl you are." She handed her daughter the food basket and straightened her red hood. "Now be careful and hurry straight there," she said. "And don't forget what I've taught you. Never stray from the path and never ever talk to strangers." "I won't," promised Little Red Riding Hood. She kissed her mother goodbye and set off for her grandmother's cottage in the forest. Little Red Riding Hood swung the basket of food and hummed a little tune as she skipped along the path. It was a beautiful spring morning. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and the air was sweet with the perfume of flowers. She had been to her grandmother's house hundreds of times, but she'd never made the journey on her own before. The deeper she went into the forest, the taller the trees seemed to grow, and the darker it became. Little Red Riding Hood began to feel a little nervous, imagining all kinds of scary creatures lurking in the shadows. Her skip broke into a jog, and then her jog broke into a run. She was in such a hurry that she nearly ran straight into the huntsman. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood," he said. "What brings you to the forest today?" Little Red Riding Hood smiled. She liked the huntsman and was relieved to see a familiar face. "My grandmother isn't feeling very well, so I'm taking her this basket of food," she told him. It's the first time I've walked there all by myself," she added. "What a kind, brave girl you are," said the huntsman. "I'm going that way myself, so we can walk together if you like." "That would be lovely," beamed Little Red Riding Hood. With the huntsman beside her, the forest didn't seem so dark and scary after all. "So what are you doing in the forest today?" she asked the huntsman. I'm trying to catch a big bad wolf, he replied. He's a terrible nuisance, sneaking into people's farmyards, wrecking their vegetable patches and stealing their animals. Oh dear, gasped Little Red Riding Hood. I hope you catch him soon. Before long they came to a fork in the path. This is the turn to my grandmother's house, said Little Red Riding Hood. Thank you for walking with me. I'll be fine on my own from here. So the huntsman said goodbye and went on his way. Alone again, Little Red Riding Hood looked around. It's such a beautiful day, she thought, and my poor grandmother is stuck in bed. A pretty bunch of flowers will cheer her up. Forgetting what her mother had told her, Little Red Riding Hood ran off the path to a cluster of nodding bluebells. She picked one, then she saw some sunny yellow daffodils a little further off. Each time she picked a flower, she saw an even prettier one further on. And so she went deeper and deeper into the forest away from the path. The little girl was so busy picking flowers that she nearly ran straight into a wolf. Yelping, she jumped back in fright. She'd never seen a wolf before. Good morning, little girl, said the wolf. What are you doing in this deep, dark forest all by yourself? I'm sorry, Little Red Riding Hood replied nervously. I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, especially not to big bad wolves. But I am not a big bad wolf, he lied through his teeth. I am a nice, friendly wolf. In fact, the huntsman is a friend of mine. The wolf seemed so charming and polite, Little Red Riding Hood didn't think there could be any harm in talking to him. So she told him, My grandmother lives in a little cottage nearby. She's not feeling very well, so I'm taking her this basket of food and picking a bunch of flowers for her bedside. What a nice little girl you are, said the wolf. He licked his lips, thinking, what a tasty meal she'd be. If I can get to the old woman's cottage first, I'll be able to eat the girl and her grandmother for lunch. Just look at those beautiful buttercups over there, said the wolf, and those daisies a little further on. Wouldn't they look lovely in your bunch of flowers? Oh, yes, agreed Little Red Riding Hood, and she ran over to pick some. The wolf watched the little girl disappear into the forest. Then he raced ahead to her grandmother's cottage and knocked on the door. Who's there? Came a frail old voice from inside. It's your granddaughter, said the wolf in a girlish voice. I've bought you a basket of food for lunch. What a sweet little girl you are, Little Red Riding Hood, the old woman called back. Please let yourself in. I'm too weak to get out of bed. So the wolf pushed open the door and stepped into the cottage. Without saying another word, the wolf went straight to the poor old woman's bed and gobbled her up. The wolf belched. Now I just have to wait for the little girl, he thought, looking around the old woman's cottage for a place to hide. He tried to crouch under the table, but it was too low. He tried to squeeze into the dresser, but it was too narrow. Then he had an idea. The big bad wolf wrapped the old woman's shawl around his shoulders, put on her spectacles, pulled her nightcap down to his ears, and climbed into her bed, drawing the kilt right up to his nose. His mouth watered and his stomach rumbled as he lay waiting for his next curse to arrive. By the time Little Red Riding Hood had gathered as many flowers as she could carry, it was almost lunchtime. She quickly retraced her steps back to the path and hurried to her grandmother's cottage. Little Red Riding Hood stopped outside the house. That's strange, she thought. Grandmother doesn't normally leave her door wide open. She knocked on the open door. Who's there? Called a muffled voice. It's Little Red Riding Hood, she answered, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. I've brought you a basket of food and a bunch of flowers, she said. What a lovely girl you are, came the voice from under the bed covers. Oh dear, thought Little Red Riding Hood. Grandmother must be really sick. She doesn't sound right at all. When she walked over to the bed, she got a terrible shock. Her grandmother didn't look right either. Oh, Grandmother, what big ears you have, said Little Red Riding Hood. All the better to hear you with, came the muffled reply. What big eyes you have, she added. All the better to see you with, said the wolf, sitting up and giving her a wide toothy grin. What big teeth you have, Little Red Riding Hood gasped in alarm. All the better to eat you with, cried the wolf. And with that he sprang out of bed and swallowed the little girl whole, hood, cloak, and all. The wolf patted his full round belly and gave a satisfied belch. Now I could do with a little nap, he yawned. So he climbed back into the bed and fell sound asleep. A little while later, the huntsman came by. I'll just see if the old woman needs anything, he thought. So he knocked softly on the door. But the only reply he got was a loud growling snore. I've never heard an old woman snore like that before, thought the huntsman. I'd better make sure she's all right. He peered through the window, and there, snoring away on the bed, lay the big bad wolf. At last, I've caught him, cried the huntsman, and he crept into the cottage. There was no sign of Little Red Riding Hood or her grandmother. Could the wolf have eaten them? He wondered. If he did, I might be able to save them. He took a large pair of scissors from the dresser and began to cut open the wolf's bulging belly. Snip! A flash of red velvet appeared. Snippety snip! Out sprang Little Red Riding Hood. Snipper, snippety snip! Up popped her grandmother, looking very confused. Thank you for rescuing us, cried Little Red Riding Hood, hugging the huntsman. It wasn't at all nice in there. While the wolf was still asleep, they came up with a cunning plan. The huntsman collected a large pile of rocks. Little Red Riding Hood stuffed them into the wolf's belly. Then her grandmother sewed it all up. This ought to teach that troublesome wolf a lesson. He won't forget, declared the huntsman. Just then the wolf woke up. "Ooh, something I ate has really disagreed with me," he groaned, rubbing his belly. "I must have indigestion." As the wolf rolled out of bed, the rocks rattled noisily inside him. "What's wrong with me?" asked the wolf. "We've seen rocks into your belly," giggled Little Red Riding Hood. Now everyone will hear you coming. So you won't be able to creep around stealing people's animals ever again. The wolf was furious. You're even sneakier than I am, he complained, and he stomped off into the forest, muttering and spluttering, while the rocks clattered inside him. With his belly full of rocks, the big bad wolf had to change his ways. He made such a noise wherever he went that the local farmers paid him to work in their fields as a scarecrow. And from that day on, Little Red Riding Hood never again forgot what her mother had taught her: not to stray from the path and never ever talk to strangers, especially not to big bad wolves. If you liked the video, I hope you subscribe my channel. See you next time.